Welcome to my novel, The Wrong 10 Seconds. It's about moving past the choices we make out of desperation. I'm recording it here in short chapters, hoping it helps you all pass these strange times. None of us know how the pandemic will turn out, but I can at least promise a happy ending for this book, within reason, of course. Chapter 1, Charlie, Wednesday afternoon. Minutes before his life collided with the dogs, Charlie rescued a shopping trolley in distress. His supermarket shift had ended, but that didn't mean work was done. At home, Harriet would understand if she noticed his prolonged absence at all. Charlie found the trolley when he brought rubbish to the skip out back. Someone had planted it in the drainage ditch, possibly some youths bored in the sodden summer holidays. The trolley's end gleamed, rain-washed, pointing upward, while its handle languished in the mud. The water hurried on regardless of its plight. Both parties maintained an endearing dignity. What reward awaited after the water's toil? A bigger river, roaring welcome? Maybe this trickle would join the stream Harriet and the kids had loved, near their old home outside the city. Charlie started down the bank in a half-crouch. His knees groaned in protest. They'd been whinging for years now. From too much stress, Harriet used to say, chiding him to relax. Getting too old, he would argue, and she always laughed. Old? Not a chance. I've still got plans for you. Charlie teetered, clinging to a rope of bindweed, a foot from the bottom of the bank. His breath whistled through his nose as he inhaled the scent of earth-silted water. From the other side of the ditch, traffic sighed on the city's ring road. He'd have to let go. Right, he muttered to the cart. We've still got plans for you. He released the vines and swung his hand to the trolley cage, swaying dangerously in the split second he had to rely on his legs. Once he got his breath back, Charlie switched the trolley in the shallow water before dragging it upwards. He marched the dripping cart back to its rightful place. Its colleagues in the line of trolleys seemed indifferent, but surely the lost member of the flock was grateful. Charlie sanitized his hands for 20 seconds and inspected the shop entrance, plucking a discarded crisp bag from the plants wagon. Velvety petunias sagged in closely packed cartons, dull against the overcast sky. Charlie reached for the spray bottle to revive them, but someone had left it empty. The shopping cart wasn't the only one with indifferent colleagues. A Mercedes rushed into the nearest parking space, and a woman exited and clipped past him to the automatic doors. "Excuse me," Charlie pushed his glasses further up his nose. "Why have you parked in a disabled parking space when you don't have a blue badge?" The woman tapped a sharp fingernail against the title on her lanyard, Assistant Head. "I work with special needs students at St. Peter's College year-round, love. The world won't end if I cut a corner this once. I'll clear the space before you know it." The potted berry bush's sun-starved leaves crumbled between Charlie's fingers. He vigilantly guarded disabled spaces everywhere he went, never taking a space himself unless Harriet was with him. But how tantalizing to think decades of being morally irreproachable might entitle one to a few minutes' respite. He wasn't sure he knew how to do respite. Two teenage girls rounded the corner from the newsagent and looped a dog's chain over a post by the supermarket entrance. A dog so ugly it must have been an expensive thoroughbred. Just as the girls' appearances were so deliberately casual, glossy hanging hair, torn jeans, tight vests, they must have spent a great deal of money and effort to master the look. "Good afternoon," Charlie greeted, gesturing them through the automatic door ahead of him. They shot him glances as they passed. "Down, boy," said the blonde one, and both girls giggled. Whimpering, the dog snapped her head this way and that, as if she'd never left a leafy residential street before. "Don't be frightened." Charlie bent to stroke the dog. He and Harriet used to let people bring dogs into their pub, but the supermarket wasn't so friendly. "You wouldn't like it inside anyway," he assured the dog, and went in himself. Charlie checked the water levels in the cut flower buckets, reluctant to pass the girls further along the aisle by the sweets. "We probably shouldn't get any," the brunette sighed. "Yeah, my mum would act like we'd get fat or something." The blonde fiddled with her handbag strap. "Know what we could get, though? Some nappies and take a picture of Ginge with them." The brown-haired minion agreed. And next time you could make her actually eat the dog poo. She totally would. Blondie laughed, then whirled around to get her bearings. Right, where... Oi, do you mind? She turned to Charlie, a round, cherubic face with wide blue eyes gleaming malice. He snapped a wilting side bloom from a bunch of asters. I'm afraid if you're seeking excrement, we don't stock that here. No, snapped Blondie, and I know Taekwondo, so don't try anything, pedo. The girls ran off, shrieking with laughter. Letting the dead blossom fall into the water, Charlie looked around. Thank goodness the shop wasn't crowded. Never had he been treated with such animosity. His mother-in-law didn't count. Was it his age, or his attempts to disguise the remains of his American accent? Or did his irritation glare through the veneer of his manners, giving the impression that he'd... Surely not. He'd raised 2 children of his own. He took out his pocket sanitizer bottle and scrubbed his hands. Crossing the store, he found the assistant headmistress tapping her foot impatiently as the afternoon checkout boy searched for a price on her sandwich. Charlie reminded the young fellow, 2448 is the sandwich's code. Avoiding the snacks aisle now populated by those horrid girls, Charlie entered the dim light and bare cement of the warehouse servants' quarters. He skirted the boxes no one had bothered to compact and entered the office. Been wondering when you'd come, cash up. The manager spun in his chair to face Charlie. Chris has your form. Chris, one of the deputies, passed the paper without turning from his inventory screen. Sign away, mate. Charlie obeyed and handed it to Ben. The manager signed his acknowledgement of the till transfer, his wide signature like a hawk in flight, above Charlie's timid, ferreting little angles. Lucky I was available today, I suppose, Charlie noted for the 3rd time since agreeing to come in at their desperate 7 a.m. phone call. It hadn't yet earned him any thanks. Why wouldn't you be available? Ben's laugh shook his broad belly. Are you expecting Olivia back tomorrow? Charlie continued. She's down to working early again. She'll be fine. Hangovers don't last that long. Chris punched a loud sum on the keyboard. With all due respect, her absences are a common occurrence. Maybe... Relax. Drinking is part of our culture here. You'll get used to it. I've lived here more than half my life. In a pub, no less, snapped Charlie. Besides, he'd known binge drinkers in America. He'd lived with one growing up. Gives you extra hours, though, don't it, if she misses the odd shift? Plus, I'm putting her on the deputy track. It'll motivate her to work harder. Ben sat back in his cushioned desk chair, studying Charlie from pale eyes sunk in his ruddy face. Stunned, Charlie leaned against the wall. I've been here longer, and you haven't taken me off a 0 hours contract. I've got managerial experience, and the things I put up with here. Oh, we know. You never stop banging on about your pub. A smile twitched around Ben's mouth. Shut down, though, didn't it? For personal reasons, not business ones. I've made my decision. Go home and enjoy the rest of your day off. Make a life outside of work. You might like it, Chris added, striking the keyboard again. What would these two know? Charlie's outside of work life filled him so intensely the only way not to drown was by pouring himself into this thankless job. But now, as Charlie walked back through the shop, he found it in him to ignore everything. Blondie and Sidekick bickering in the hygiene aisle. Spilled milk crusted on chiller shelves. A long checkout queue forming as Rich tried to recall the code for aubergine. Muddy footprints around the entrance. Charlie had mopped an hour ago, but the white tiles would not be placated. When nothing seemed good enough, was there any point in trying? Outside, the dog still cowered, black gums exposed, emitting a whine like a distant alarm. Charlie noticed red tints in her fur as he knelt beside her, his left knee cracking. Ginger, is that your name? Those girls are beastly to you, aren't they? Here was a creature in truly dire circumstances. Her outside life, lonelier than Charlie's, and as worthy of salvation as that submerged trolley. He slipped the dog's chain off the post. You're free now, Ginger. Hurry, before they come back. It appeared poor Ginger didn't know how to do respite either. She glanced at him as if he were crazy. Go on. Charlie put his palms to the tarmac, pushing himself back to his feet. Have a run. He imagined her scrawny hind legs springing so fast they overtook her bottom. The dog's ears twitched, but her feet didn't budge. spurning his help almost as her cruel owner had. Charlie felt his face flush and crumple like a page curling on a flame. If she didn't take this chance to escape, he might cry or scream or send the flower pots through the shop window. Instead, he gripped the handles of the shopping trolley line, his knuckles chapped from relentless sanitizing. He shoved, startling the metal herd from its complacency, and the whole stack rattled toward the dog. Her yelp sounded above the accelerating carts. She skittered to one side and then another before finally leaping forward ahead of the stampede. The line of trolleys clanged against a bollard, squealing sideways and halting, but the dog carried on, tail spiking the air, howling past black-clad teenagers and sallow-faced, pot-bellied men smoking outside the chippy down the street. Charlie grinned and hastened in the opposite direction toward his van with its blue badge. He continued ignoring things, just a few moments longer, barely noticing the pale, hooded adolescent fumbling with her phone on the corner. Sometimes he and Harriet joked, well, he joked on her behalf, that while he was at work, she went adventuring. He would ask on arriving home, "What have you been up to?" and supply her answers such as picking mangoes on a tropical island, climbing Mount Everest, swimming in the Vermont lake where we met. It drew a smile. The little dog could realize Harriet's fantasies, if on a smaller scale, within their Midland city. She would nip a yob's heels, or rescue leftovers from a rubbish bin, and find a family that wouldn't mock her. Whistling along to a Fleetwood Mac tune on the van's radio, Charlie left the scene of his respite. That's the end of chapter 1. I'm going to make videos with chapter 2 and chapter 3, where you will find some twists coming up as we shift in perspective. Thanks.